Hey, there's Jennifer Smith making an exit. Jennifer, thank you, our Director of Children's Ministry, and all the volunteers who came out this week. It was so much fun. We did it in the evening. I think that's the first time we've done that ever or in a long time, and it allowed a lot of parents and older siblings to be part of that because nobody was at work in the evening, and we had, oh man, this place was filled with kids, and if you didn't see it, I noticed in the video, they had stalactites and stalagmites, I can never remember which is which, made out of styrofoam and painted, and there was colored lights that were on them, so it felt like you were really in a cave, and they had Nate had a video, an audio tape playing of water dripping in a cave, and it was dark, and the kids loved it. It was like a cave in here. It was so cool. It was fun to watch the kids each day get more excited and more excited. The first day they were walking in like, what is this place? And by the end of the week, they didn't want to leave. We had so much fun at Cave Quest talking about Jesus as the light of the world. So thank you, Jennifer, and to our volunteers and all the kids who participated. They've been singing all morning long, and we really, really appreciate it. I also want to give thanks for Dan Menzie, who offered on my behalf the prayer from Bishop O. About our tragedy in Orlando and how, as United Methodists, we remember that in the midst of that dark time and all dark time in life, that United Methodists gather with other Christians and other people of faith around the world to be the light of love and acceptance and forgiveness and healing in this world. That is God's intention. And so as we choose to follow Jesus, that is our call, is to not be hateful against the haters, or seek vengeance against those who are vengeful, but to just love people. That is so difficult, and it wasn't easy for Jesus, so it's not going to be easy for us. But if we truly want to be like Jesus, it means we live like Jesus, even in the most difficult times. Let's begin our sermon time with a prayer. Will you pray with me? God, we are so glad that in what can be perceived as darkness in the world, your light shines eternally. We only need to look for it and embrace that light that brings healing and courage and fullness in our journey. And so God bless our lives, anoint our spirits, and this morning as we prepare to hear the message, open our spiritual ears and our hearts to hear something that will change and transform us, to help us grow on our faith journey. So may the words of my mouth and the message that will rest upon our hearts be transformative for our lives and acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. When we look in the Bible and read its many stories, in the Christian scriptures, what we often call the New Testament, there are 4 Gospels that started out: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke were the first 3 that were written about 60 years after Jesus died and was resurrected. A lot of people don't realize that. For 60 years, it was an oral story. People told other people for decades. And then finally, when it was written down, the message was very clear that the expectation of the Christian community was that Jesus was going to return at any moment. It was just be patient. Jesus is going to arrive at any second. In the meantime, here's how we live in Christian community. By the time the 4th Gospel, John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, by the time John was written and disseminated among community, things had shifted quite a bit. They began to understand, well, it's been a while, and maybe Jesus isn't coming back right away, though we still hope that. So long term, how do we live as a Christian community as we expect Jesus' return? And so the shape of John's gospel takes on a different tone and tenor than the previous 3. John's gospel very uniquely offers insight into the very mystery of Jesus, taking us, think about it as you will, kind of behind the scenes of Jesus' ministry, where we learn a lot about, we get a glimpse of his eternal origin and his divine nature. The author even records a lot of events of Jesus' life in John's gospel, and there's a number of symbolic expressions that you'll find in John. We call it metaphor, where Jesus is described as bread. Jesus says, I'm the bread. Jesus is described as water, as light, as life, as the Word, as shepherd, as a doorway, and as the way. Now, prior to the reading that we're going to hear about in just a minute from the 10th chapter of John, we know that the preceding chapters kind of lay out the story that Jesus is in the community of Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, there were people hanging out with Jesus. He was very popular. And he's given them kind of a Q&A time. You want to ask questions about your faith, about religion? ask away. And they would be gathered in the community place, and Jesus would just kind of take their questions, right? Well, also in that group were religious leaders in the community that held a lot of power and authority. They were called Pharisees and scribes. And I got to imagine, here are the Pharisees and the scribes with their robes and very indignant, thinking, who is this guy? These people should be asking us the questions, not him. And so they thought to themselves, let's trip this guy up. Let's ask him some very tough theological questions and see how he fares. And so they asked questions of Jesus that they considered very complicated, very heady, and Jesus had absolutely no problem answering these questions. Come on, he's Jesus, right? And at one point, Jesus even said to them, he said, I'm the light of the world, and whoever chooses to follow me will never walk in darkness but in light. That was our theme for Vacation Bible Camp. And Jesus loved to talk in metaphor. The things that he expressed were symbolic of something else. He would say one thing but mean another. And he even directed his attention at one point toward the Pharisees who wanted him dead. We know that. And he even said to them, I know that you guys want to kill me. And the confrontation became so heated that at one point the Pharisees begin to gather rocks because they're going to stone Jesus. And Jesus made a safe exit. We don't know how. The Bible just says he safely got away. Jesus leaves that crowd, moves a little further on in the community, and there he sees a guy in the dirt. He's a beggar, begging for food and for money. And he's blind. And the community knows this guy has been here every day, his whole life. He's blind, been blind since birth. He's never been able to see. And Jesus walks over to this guy, and he bends down. He takes some dirt, some dust from the ground of Jerusalem, and he spits into it, and spits in it, and makes a little mud pack. And then he walks over to the blind man and applies it to his eyelids. And immediately, the guy's healed. He can see for the first time in his life. And the people, a lot of devout Jews in the community, they're going like, how could this miracle even occur? And there were religious leaders that continued to follow Jesus, who were looking for any reason to attack Jesus. They got upset because Jesus healed a blind man on the Sabbath day, which for a devout Jew, that was a real no-no. You didn't do anything on the Sabbath day. And therefore, with this very major infraction of the Sabbath, they had reason to question whether this guy was even healed, right? And when they finally relented and said, okay, he's healed, then they began to question the one who healed him, Jesus, and whether he really had any authority and whether he was really from God. See how crazy this is? Jesus goes to a man who's blind and heals him, and they didn't want to see the truth. They didn't want to see that Jesus was from God. And they were doing all that they could to discredit Jesus. Never mind the fact that he had just healed a guy who had been blind his whole life. Never mind the fact that Jesus had been saying to everybody that he had come to give sight to the blind in all the world. And so one has to wonder who's really blind in this account, right? The guy on the ground or the religious leaders in the community? And it gets better. The Pharisees go up to Jesus and they say, well, surely, Jesus, we're not blind, are we? And Jesus responded, if you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say we see, your sin remains. And then Jesus continued. And this is where our reading picks up today from John's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 7, where Jesus again employs this metaphor, this symbolic language. And he's realizing in doing so, not everybody was getting it. Not everybody was comprehending his words. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. Why would he have said sheep? Because 2,000 years ago in that region of the world, most everybody worked raising or were employed by shepherds, and everybody knew about sheep. So he's using a metaphor that he thinks will connect. I'm the gate for the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and bandits. But the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate, Jesus said. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in, and will go out, and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I come that they may have life, and have it, say that word with me, abundantly. I love that. Jesus doesn't just say life, but abundant life. Big difference. So here's the real irony for me in this story. Jesus took the dirt, spit in it. It was just regular dirt, regular spit. Applies it to this man's eyes. Lo and behold, the guy is able to see. All the while, the Pharisees remained blind to the very presence of God before them. They refused to see Jesus for who he was. Just as I believe there are many people today who refuse to see Jesus for who he is. Truly. Why do you think it is that we humans are so blind to the reality of Christ? And some of you might say, well, Jesus doesn't make it any easier by referring to himself as bread and water and shepherd and a gate. But of all those metaphors, probably the most relatable for us is the metaphor of a gate. Why? Because we're surrounded by gates every day in our lives, aren't we? A lot of you have fences around your homes. The only way to get in and out of your yard is through a gate, yeah. There are a lot of people in Springfield and other large communities that live in gated communities. I pass by a gated community coming to church every Sunday morning. You can't get in a gated community unless you know the passcode or you have a card or you buzz and somebody allows you in through the gate. When we travel by air, if you've ever been on an airplane, you know you have to arrive to and depart from a gate. And in order to get even that far, you have to go through a security gate. Please take off your shoes, right? And people who manage websites are known as gatekeepers. Did you know that? And scientists even refer to stargates that might one day provide access to galaxies far, far away. But gates also bring something else to mind. Gates bring to mind something that separates those on the inside from those on the outside. And sometimes that separation is for protection, and many times it's privilege. And so when we think about 2,000 years of the church interpreting Jesus as the gate, it's often been seen as a gate that separates the outsider from the insider. And I don't think that was Jesus' intention at all. On a very narrow view, the way that most Christians might view it, those inside the gate seem to be comprised of sheep of all different sizes and shapes and ages and colors and beliefs and unbeliefs, lifestyles, interests. All of us sheep, we are the church, the body of Christ. We're a most unlikely flock. Turn around and look at each other. And yet we are united by our common vision and love of God. This love of God and our hopeful desire to one day see past our blinders that we have into the full vision of redemption that God offers for everyone through Jesus Christ. So that's the narrow view of many Christians in the church. Let's go to a broader view. Let's look beyond the walls. Let's look outside the gate. And when we do that and we look outside, then we begin to see, well, heaven's sakes, look, there are people of all different sizes and shapes and colors and lifestyles and beliefs and interests. And I don't think it would be very hard for a casual observer to notice that those on the outside are nearly identical to those on the inside. That's fascinating. And if they look like us, can we even recognize them, those who are on the outside? Well, last Sunday I shared a little bit about a particular flock of sheep who number about 80 million who live here in the United States, in North America. And they would see themselves, for the most part, these 80 millions, as being on the outside. And they're identified as millennials. And this generational segment differs greatly from all previous generations. Millennials are those who were born in North America, in the United States, approximately between 1980 and the year 2000. So if you're born in there, you probably already know you're a millennial. They are the most ethnically and racially diverse of all previous generational groups. They grew up with all the modern technologies that we didn't necessarily have growing up, cell phones and Facebook and YouTube. And millennials not only dominate social media, my friends, they own it. It is theirs. And unlike previous generations, millennials are, while they're in their 20s, much less likely to be married, to start a family, or be financially independent. We know that a lot of millennials in their 20s still even live with mom and dad. They're also more educated than any of us were in our 20s. And they are much more accepting of others. This is an important distinction for millennials. They are much more accepting of other people, regardless of their lifestyle or their life situation. And millennials seek to have hands-on experiences that they believe will truly change the world for the better. They are very missional. And that's not to say previous generations weren't missional either, but for the most part, the older people that go beyond millennials, and I'm not a millennial, we're much more apt to be engaged in mission every once in a while, but we're quick to write a check and give money, which is phenomenal, different with millennials. They're not going to write a check because they don't even carry checkbooks. But they're going to want to say, put me to work. If it means changing the world, making a better place for me and for future generations, I want to be part of that. And perhaps most important for us to realize is millennials self-identify as being less religious, meaning they really do not find church or worship important, something that they would value. They may be spiritual, for sure, they'll say that, but they aren't really committed to a church or to be religious. And when asked why, and this is where it gets interesting, because everybody that does studies and tries to figure things out are asking the millennials, why is this happening? Millennials most ought to respond that church is boring, that it's not relevant to them. And then when they get into a church, their experience, whether it's accurate or not, it's their experience, the church is unfriendly. People are unfriendly, they're judgmental, and hypocritical of others. And so millennials might very well like Jesus. They may even say, I love Jesus, but they don't really feel any connection to the local church in their communities where they live. So you see, the gate feels closed to them and their friends who might be different from the status quo. So a millennial might come to a church and feel like they fit in, but then they hear people go, well, you know, we don't really like those kind of people. A millennial's like, I'm out of here. And so the challenge for the church in the 21st century is to learn how to reach out to everyone, indeed, but certainly to focus on this 80 million generational people who self-identify as not really being too interested in the church. In fact, they would closely identify as feeling like they're outside the gate. And so what are churches to do? What are some solutions? Well, there are many, many solutions because everybody's studying this and everybody's blogging about it and holding seminars and writing books, but I'm going to offer a few that I think are relevant for our conversation and our congregation, because either we're already engaging in it or we've begun serious prayer and study about how to make these happen. Number one, offer worship experiences that appeal to millennials. So here's the interesting thing. Millennials, when asked, what kind of worship do you like? They like traditional, what we're in today. But it's got to be very exceptional, very well done traditional worship. In a nice sanctuary with old hymns that they love. The choir's got to be good. The preaching needs to be very good. They want preaching, biblical preaching. So they don't want somebody that'll just kind of be nebulous out there. They want a sermon they can walk away with. And so they love traditional worship. They also like a type of worship experience that really hasn't been given a name other than post-contemporary. So a lot of you know we do a contemporary service in a gym. Wonderful worship, very high energy, drums and guitars, and it's high energy. Not real appealing to millennials. Because why? Well, because that's mom and dad's worship, right? And so they're very attracted to a new style of worship that I would call emerging or immersion worship, where it is more contemplative, it's a slower pace, it's quiet. It's almost like a coffee house style of worship. Our youth do this. When they lead in worship, they lead every fifth Sunday. It is like that. It's very quiet, contemplative. That's very attractive to millennials. And we're beginning to pray about and talk about offering another worship experience here at Wesley, or at least through Wesley, somewhere in our community that offers this kind of worship experience. We also know millennials want an opportunity to connect. A lot of folks come into a church these days, if they're not millennials, and they're happy to sit in a pew. Millennials, they would rather be put to work, and then, they might sit in a pew. And so churches that offer a lot of missional activities and connection activities are very attractive to millennials. So to that end, a little over a year ago, we hired Christy Seiler to come in as our connection coordinator. Christy's number one priority on Sunday morning is to seek out anyone who's new, whether millennial or not, and help connect them into the life of the church. One of our volunteer staff, Ted Madden, does exceptional at his calling in ministry to provide missional opportunities out in the community. So if you want to get hands-on experience, regardless of who you are, Ted's got all these opportunities throughout the year to do hands-on mission and ministry. Next thing is, all churches are going to have to learn to shift their expectation of what constitutes being a Christian. And by that I mean churches that say, you must fit inside this box and don't question, this is who you are as a Christian, and if you're outside that box, you're not part of the flock. To use the old language, we're going to heaven, everybody else is going to hell. Not attractive to millennials. Millennials would rather be more attracted to a message that is, God loves everyone, and we're on this planet Earth together. Let's see how we can move it into being God's kingdom. And so they want those opportunities to connect. They want hands-on mission and service, and they don't want somebody telling them what being a Christian is all about. They know what it means to be a Christian. They've heard Jesus' message, just like we have. Another piece that's very interesting, millennials, for the most part, have no denominational loyalties. And most of us know what that means. So me, I've been a Methodist all my life. My father was a Methodist pastor. I was Methodist born, Methodist bred, and when I'm died, Methodist dead. Remember that old saying? I think Baptist, you can just put in any denomination there. But truly, if I go on vacation, when I go on vacation, and I go to another community, I'm most likely to go to another United Methodist Church. Not that I don't love the Baptists or Lutherans, and I'm sure I would get fed there too. It's this denominational loyalty thing. Millennials do not have that. They don't care if you're Methodist or Lutheran, and in fact, they'll find a place that feeds them and engages them in ministry, and they'll call that home regardless of where grandma went to church or what mom and dad told them to go. And so you're seeing a lot of interesting churches out there today that are losing their denominational moniker, and they're called 360 churches or Life churches or Church of the Well or Flowing Water Church. And you're thinking, what denomination is that? Those churches realize that's not attractive to millennials by sticking out the denomination out in front. Also, the way that millennials will attend church is different than the way that people who came along before millennials would go to church. A lot of folks my age and older, for us, regular attendance is every Sunday. We're there every Sunday unless we're sick or work takes us away or vacation takes us away, but we're there. For millennials, regular attendance for them might be twice a month. And so if you go to a millennial and say, well, we sure miss you on Sundays, why aren't you here every Sunday? Probably is all they need to hear to go find another church. And we have to accept that their attendance to a church is different than our expectation. And then finally, we have to be genuine with and accepting and affirming of all people on both sides of the gate if we expect to attract people who are not churched, and especially millennials. And here at Wesley, we continue to explore ways and offer ministry opportunities where everybody feels welcomed. I really feel like we do that very well. And we offer opportunities for people to grow in their faith because we believe that Jesus invites everyone. Jesus is an exclusive club that you get into only if you know the password. Jesus says, I'm the gate, I'm the way, I'm the good shepherd. Come and follow me. So it's in this place that we can truly open our eyes to the reality of God's love through Jesus Christ. Do you believe that you have the ability, that you're at the place in your faith journey where you could shepherd other people in their faith? Because that's what we offer here. It's an opportunity for you to grow in your faith so you can shepherd others. Are you willing to witness to your relationship with the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ? We had children all week at Vacation Bible School doing that, Vacation Bible Camp. Every time they shared a God moment, we put out a little candle up here. And so all this is people with their witness in action. Children that were able to share the love of God by saying, I saw God today where? So you don't have to go to seminary, you don't have to have the Bible memorized. Being a Christian disciple is telling other people about why you love Jesus and where you saw God in your life. Because we really do have a choice, my friends. We can either choose to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, or we can just do our own thing. And we can just blindly meander and stray through life just like lost sheep. And so I have some homework for us to do. Oh boy. It's summertime, and he's giving me homework. And this is homework for next Sunday. I want you to pray about and to ponder upon these 3 following questions. And don't worry about writing them down. We'll get them on the website this week and on the email that goes out. Question number 1. Why do people need Christ? You ever thought about that? Why do people need Christ? And maybe you already have an idea formulated in your head. Maybe you're thinking, I've never thought about that. It would be intriguing to me is to go outside to people who feel like they're outsiders, who don't know Jesus, don't have a Bible, don't go to church, and say to them, why do you need Christ? They'll have an answer for you. But why do we think people need Christ? Be thinking about that, praying about that. Second question, why do people need the church? Capital C church. Well, you're all backwards. Capital C church. All the world churches. Why do people need the church? Pray about that, think about that, and think about your response. Because next week, if time allows, I'll run around here with a microphone and get some of your responses, like Oprah Winfrey does, right? And you get a car, and you get a car, and we'll have fun with the questions. And then finally, the third question, why do people need Wesley United Methodist Church? I want you to think about this one and really pray about this one. Because what if worship ended here in a few minutes and we turned out the lights and we locked the doors and we walked away for good and never came back? Would anybody in our neighborhood even notice? Question to ask. Why do people need Wesley United Methodist Church? So we're going to explore these questions next Sunday in worship. Why? Because we need to be continually heightening our understanding of why so many people out there who would say they like Jesus, maybe even love Jesus, aren't too thrilled about organized religion and the church. So may we have eyes to truly see everyone, everywhere, inside the gate, outside the gate. And may the gate here at Wesley be open wide as we are accepting of all people who seek the love of God through Jesus Christ. May that be our intention. May that be our hope. May that be our prayer.